Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the IB Nation Sports Talk Show. I'm Vince D'Addario. That guy right there is Jesse Stiers. We're always on the show. He, or myself or Jesse, but now we're going together and we're going to have some fun with this thing. Sean is off doing play-by-play for the Notre Dame women's basketball team. I do believe, and I should have looked this up prior to making this statement, but I do believe this is their opener, their official opener, right?
Yes.
Because they had an exhibition game the other day, which of course they dominated because that's what exhibition games are all about. But they've got Northern Illinois tonight at home at 7:00. So we'll try to get you guys out of here in case you want to go, listen to the dulcet tones of Sean Stiers on the Sirius XM network of radio stations or wherever you get your women's basketball. So I'm sure Sean would love to have you guys come over and listen to him and I am not biased in any way, shape, or form. Sean Stiers is one hell of a play-by-play guy, and he's so good he doesn't even need a color analyst. I don't know if he's going to have a color person or not, but he can definitely do the show on his own. So go check him out. He's one heck of a play-by-play guy. But in his stead, I have Stiers Jr., and I got myself, and we are going to start. Well, we're going to talk Clemson, obviously. We're going to talk about the Notre Dame Clemson game. Huge game, Jess. I mean, frankly, we did a 3-hour post-game show about it in the wee hours of Sunday morning. And so there was a lot to talk about, a lot to be excited about. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the direction where we think Clemson is headed. We're going to talk about the direction where we think Notre Dame is headed. We're going to talk about the Marcus Freeman press conference. Some interesting stuff happened from that. And, of course, the best part of the show, we will wrap up with rapid fire. So, Jess, first of all, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. I think I'm still a little delusional from the wee hours that we were up until on Sunday morning. And it was kind of crazy because the time change hit us while we were going. I was like, wow. I remember I looked down and I was like, am I losing it? Oh, wait, it's time change.
Seriously.
And so I definitely got some extra sleep going into Sunday morning. I know you probably didn't because you have a lot more going on than I do.
Not as much as I wanted.
But yeah, I've been overall today. I've been good, smooth day of work. I'm excited to talk about, the press conference with Marcus Freeman, kind of some post game thoughts now that we've kind of marinated a little bit even more. So it'll be a nice little, rundown today of just, press conference and how we feel.
Yeah, and did you have a chance to watch any of the game over again, since Saturday night? Or are you still working fresh from the original?
I'm still working fresh from the original. I remember during the game itself, I tracked every play as it was happening. Nice. So it's still pretty engraved in there. I think that's just kind of like the muscle memory. If you write it down, you just remember a little bit better. So
well, that's a good. Here's mine. I chart every play by series as well because it just helps to be able to go back. And
notes.
Exactly. It's like school, man. You take notes, good things happen, right? So yeah. Rewatching, we did the Pond Further review last night. So if anybody didn't catch that, make sure you check that out. But we broke down the film a little bit. But going back and watching, I just kind of sat back and just watched and enjoyed it, to be honest with you. And it was a very enjoyable rewatch for me, as opposed to Marshall, Stanford, frankly, any other game that they've had this year. This was a beautiful game to go back and watch because Notre Dame was in control. We talk about game control, that stat that's out there, the game control stat. And we talk about that a lot on Tuesday night when we talk about the College Football Playoff Committee and their choices and all that. Notre Dame skyrocketed in the game control category because they controlled the number 4 team in the country the entire time, which was a lot of fun to see. All right, Stiers, let's jump into this thing here. We have we actually have a rundown. We have notes. We're ready to fire here. So Marcus Freeman had his regular Monday press conference, and you and I both watched it. Let's start with this. What are your takeaways from the Marcus Freeman press conference, Jess?
I think that some of the most interesting points that he brought up is, the beginning and that his team was challenged this week. And that was like the biggest thing. I think that it was just a challenge and they rose to this, occasion. He loved the physicality of the team and the trust and belief that they kind of had overall. And I thought another thing that he said that was pretty important is that they're always continuously looking to enhance their scheme, based on personnel, based on matchup, which is a very refreshing thing to hear from a coach, is someone who's constantly kind of wanting to adapt and get better, never being kind of complacent with where they're at. And I think that's what we've seen a lot of in these last few weeks, is just a complacency and not having a complacency and wanting to get better.
No, I think that's a really good point. And there's the old adage that if you stay the same, you're getting worse, right? And I think that's kind of what he was hinting at, is that you can't. Everybody else has the same. He actually used the word mindset. He goes, everybody else has the same mindset as us, that you have to keep adapting, you have to keep changing, and if you're not, you're going to get left behind. And he's absolutely right. I mean, that's if you look at a program like Alabama, for example, back in 2012 when they beat Notre Dame in the national championship game. They were just a pound it, punch you in the face, play really good defense, et cetera. And that's how they win. And Nick Saban was smart enough to realize that college football was changing, and he had to change with it if he still wanted to be successful. And he did. They are a shadow of that from what they used to be, as far as how they run their offense and how they operate their program, because he adapted and he changed, and he's staying ahead of the curve. Notre Dame has to do the same thing. You can't run the team out from 1988 and expect to win a national championship. That's just not how it works in today's game, right? Now, you could take a lot of those players and adjust and adapt and things of that nature. I'm not saying that. They had amazing players, right? I mean, can you imagine Tim Brown and Rocket Ismail and all these different guys playing for Notre Dame in the system that they have now? I mean, don't even get me started.
Right.
But you have to be able to adapt, right? And I think that they are doing a very good job of that. I think the defense has adapted. They've made it simpler. They're triggering their linebackers. They're doing all of those things. I think the offense is starting to adapt from a personnel standpoint. They're putting guys out on the field that need to be on the field and should be on the field. They've earned the right to be on the field. And, they're playing to their strengths as well. So I think they're actually doing that. And I think Marcus Freeman has done a good job of, and he kind of mentioned this in the press conference, of adapting himself and learning as a head coach and becoming more comfortable. Because one of the people brought up, which I thought was interesting, demeanor on the sidelines and how that can be overanalyzed, and, people can take that a whole different direction. But he's like, look, every game I get more comfortable with what I'm saying on the sidelines, talking to the refs, the game day operation, like all of that. He's like, I'm better from game one to now. And he goes, I expect to be better 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now than I am right now. And I thought that spoke a lot, that he's always ever changing and looking to do something better.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point when he was asked about his demeanor. Mainly, he summed it up as like, what is needed in the moment? What does he need to do in the moment? And that's what he's still learning every week, is what he needs to do in the moment, or what's kind of needed in the moment. And he gave, the examples of when Lorenzo Styles drops the ball and, he goes over to Lorenzo and says, it's okay. Like, just catch the next one. We're fine. It's okay.
Right.
Or when Estime fumbles, he goes to Estime and goes, hey, we're going to give you the ball again. So just, don't fumble, be ready. So,
right.
Just like learning kind of in the moment on what to say. And I think that's the growth of a head coach. And that's kind of what we expected of the bumps in the road for kind of the first time head coach of Marcus Freeman this season.
Well, and I think it's the growth of a coach, period, right? Not even just a head coach, because you have to know your players. And when you're the defensive coordinator, you don't really interact with the offensive players a whole lot. I mean, it's almost like two separate teams doing their thing, and they compete against each other and they do different things, but you don't really get to know the offensive players. And it's funny that the examples that he brought up were with offensive players, right? And how he talks to those offensive players, whether it's Drew Pine, whether it was Audric Estime, whatever. It takes time to learn those guys, because as a coach and as a player, you can talk to certain guys a certain way. You can talk to other guys a certain way, right? There's some guys you got to put your arm around them. You got to Father Flanagan them. Hey, everything's going to be all right. You're good. Get them a little pat on the tush and be good to go. And there's other guys, like, I could always scream at you. You know what I mean? Like, there's guys can take it, right? I knew I could scream at you because I know your dad, right? And I know that he screams at you, and so I know we're good, right? So you have to know how to address your players and how they're going to be able to respond to that. And he's learning all of that stuff. And
Right.
there's also nuances and ways to talk to referees. Sometimes you can scream at them. Sometimes you got to put your arm around them and pat them on the butt. You know what I mean? So he's learning all of those things every single game. And I think it shows. I think his confidence level as a head coach on game day is showing for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, that when it came to the referees, he just brought up that if just have conviction, and that's what he did. He felt strongly about it in the moment, and that's what he teaches, his players is have conviction with anything that you're going to do. And it was nice to see him have that conviction for his team on the sideline. And now in hindsight, he could go back and he said, "Oh, I don't think it was targeting." How much of that is like him just saying it, but actually versus which is true, but still in the moment, having the conviction, I think, is a good thing. And another thing that he kind of went into was, the ranking and what effect that has on the team. So I'm curious what you think. He thought it builds confidence and it allows the guys to kind of trust and believe in the process and the things that they're doing as a team.
Well, and success will do that, right? And I know that he also mentioned at one point that when they weren't having success, when they would lose to Stanford or whatever, like in his quiet moments, he's questioning whether things are going right, but you can't be that way in front of your players. You always have to, stand ground and be confident in what you're doing. And I thought that was a bit of a vulnerable moment for him. You know what I mean? He's like, hey, yeah, sometimes you feel like you don't have all the answers, but you can't be like that in front of your players. And so I thought that was good. I think he's a very self-reflective person, which I think is very, very good as far as when you're learning to be a head coach. But as far as being ranked and all of that, I agree. I think when you are rewarded for success, when you are rewarded for the process, I think that goes a long way to appreciating the process and respecting the process, if that makes sense. I said process like 13 times there, but it's true. I mean, you think you have the answers, but then when those answers are solidified in a positive way, right? And they just went out there and dominated the number 4 team in the country. And you have to be reminded of that sometimes. And then you have to be rewarded with that. I think they ended up 20 in the AP poll, which that's a huge jump, obviously. And a lot of things fluctuated around them.
And the big one comes out tomorrow.
Bingo. What is that going to look like? That's really what I'm interested to see, because if they can get into like 19 or 20 range after this game, you get 2 more. I don't want to say gimme games because we've seen what happened earlier, right? I don't want to go there.
Let's just take care of some business.
You have winnable games. They're winnable. I will say that. They are winnable games. And then if USC can take care of their business over the next few weeks, which is not going to be easy because they do have UCLA, I believe, in that stretch, they're going to be there might be a top 5 team, top 6, top 7, top 10 for sure, right? You're going to have another great opportunity to make some waves.
You could nestle yourself in the top 15, 12 potentially. If you want to, you never know what's going to happen in those last few weeks up there in the rankings. And this is the best time to come on strong,
Absolutely, because Michigan and Ohio State are going to play. I mean, there's a lot of the. You're not saying that that's going to help Notre Dame specifically because they're going to be above either way, but you're going to have a lot of these teams playing each other and knocking each other off, particularly in the Big 12 and the Pac-12. You're going to get a lot of guys playing each other. So there's going to be opportunity for Notre Dame to rise up if they can take care of their business the way that they should. And Irish Chi-Town, you took the words right out of my mouth, says, Vince, are you saying we have a chance at a New Year's Six bowl?
There's a chance.
There's absolutely
a chance.
There's a chance. They need to win all 3. I think that goes without saying.
Other things have to happen.
And there has to be a little bit of chaos. There absolutely does. Because, and I remind people of this all the time, I don't believe any 3-loss team has ever made it into the New Year's Six games. I don't believe. I'd have to do the research on that to double check. But at the same time, outside of the top 4, outside of the college football playoff, the rest of the New Year's Six games are about revenue, eyeballs, and butts in the seat.
Exactly.
Right? And if Notre Dame has a legitimate shot, they're going to get picked because they check all of those boxes.
Those are check pluses.
100%. So we'll see how things shake out. We're going to have a much better idea of what that looks like after they play USC, but then you're going to have conference championships. which I think are also going to play a role in where things are ranked, because Notre Dame obviously doesn't play on conference championship weekend. They can just sit back and watch the chaos fall and
Right.
potentially move up even more, right? So, yes, there's a chance. I'm not putting money on it, but there's a chance, right? So
Right.
it could be a lot of fun here over the next 3 weeks if Notre Dame continues to play like they played on Saturday night.
I think the best thing about the ranking is the ranking now is what a group of people did and worked very hard for. The ranking at the beginning of the season was just a preseason. No games were played. And I think that's big for this kind of group is they fell out of the rankings and now they've worked their way to earn their way back in the rankings, and seeing that kind of reflective. I know it's just a number, but the hard work, the beating of these teams compared to when you had it at the beginning of the season, I think it's just a kind of different ranking. So I think that also plays into it. The things that you talked about with Notre Dame potentially getting their ranking up towards the end of the season. I have some news for some people. If things go how they're supposed to, USC, North Carolina, and Clemson, those are 3 opponents on Notre Dame's schedules that'll be contending for conference championships coming to the end of the season. So those are things that'll be very much considered. You can say what you want about the 3 losses, but the strength of schedule is definitely up there, and that's definitely going to boost them as long as they continue to take care of what they need to. And then I think the last couple of things that I wanted to talk about with the Freeman press conference was, he got into short yardage and perimeter, and those were the areas in which obviously Notre Dame kind of dominated to win the game, is running the ball, short yardage, picking up the plays when they needed to, and then defensively shutting down the perimeter and taking away Clemson's plays. And I'll kind of start with the perimeter here a little bit. What he talked about on the perimeter is when a defense that like Golden runs, they run heavy nickel, and that puts them at a disadvantage on the perimeter because you're without a Sam linebacker, someone who's beefy, it puts more pressure on your secondary guys like Morrison, Hart, Joseph, that are coming down, smaller guys that have to make tackles in space. And so that's what they're losing kind of, with running the nickel defense. And that was the emphasis this week of we need to be physical, make these tackles, rallying onto the ball. It wasn't just a 1-person tackle.
Yes.
It was a 3, 4, 5-person tackle. And that was a big, because he was asked about the emphasis, on the perimeter. And that's what they were challenged with. And I think that they did a great job, obviously. And he thought the same thing. And I think I didn't think about it in that perspective, honestly, about, the nickel and kind of the stress that it puts on them. So hearing him talk about that was obviously really nice to see. And then when it came to, the short yardage, he talked about kind of having to find a wrinkle, doing what they do really well, but finding a way to kind of mask it. And that he talked about, going into motion. And then he also talked about, a way to kind of that you have success doing that is you control the game. And that's what he attributed Pine so much with, was controlling the game, controlling the clock, knowing when to break the huddle, when to, motion guys, drawing things out, essentially controlling this power game. And that's what they did in those short yardage situations. So just kind of curious to see, what your thoughts are about both of those kind of big areas in which we saw, I think are the big reasons why Notre Dame won is they controlled, the perimeter game of Syracuse. And then I failed to mention, shutting down perimeter run as well. They shut down the pass. And then obviously, Notre Dame's dominance in the short yardage situations, and you kind of what they did with the offense.
Well, and we touched on both of these last night, actually, and you're 100% correct. Notre Dame, what they did defensively is they forced the RPO game that Clemson likes to run. They force it into their hands, right? And Clemson was perfectly happy going outside and going to the perimeter because on film, Notre Dame's not real good in space.
Right, I mean, that's their weakness.
They've proved that over and over again. I wish I had a nickel for every time people in the chat talked about missed tackles on the perimeter.
Oh my gosh, the tackling against Clemson for where it was against Marshall. Oh my god, it's like they went through a clinic or something.
Yes, no question about it. And the physicality of those guys and the execution of the tackling in space was unbelievable. And it was a clear point of emphasis. I don't know why they would have just started this week, but Marcus Freeman talked about how the perimeter was a point of emphasis, and it clearly was. And I actually got a kick out of hearing him talk about Ben Morrison and how he's like, man, there's weight classes here, man. And he's like, you're not in the same weight class as a tight end at a Division I program. He's like, you need to go low. You need to go lower.
Yeah, he's like, he talked about how Morrison made the tackle in the first one. He walks over to the defensive coach. He's like, you need to tell Morrison he needs to probably go a little bit lower. I know he made the tackle, but he's going to have this confidence and think he can go high, and he's going to get himself kind of run over if he does that again.
Yes, no question about it. And he almost did get run over later in the game. I think that was on fourth down, or forced to fourth down. I forget which, but either way, but yeah, you got to go low when you're young. And Brian made a good point Sunday morning, that like that's a weight room game for Ben Morrison. It's okay, off season, know what you need to do. Need to get a little bit thicker and a little bit stronger. but no, it was. And you mentioned the gang tackling. I think that was the best that they've ever done with that all season. I mean, a corner would hold them up, and then almost immediately somebody would be there to clean it up. I mean, on the play that I just referenced where Ben got run over, but he held on, and then all of a sudden JD was there a split second later to clean it up. And yeah, we don't even need to talk about JD Bertrand, what kind of game he had. But I mean, the perimeter tackling was unbelievable. And Clemson played right into it because they're like, we want to be on the perimeter, and Notre Dame's like,
well, they just
bring
kept
it on.
doing it and doing it and doing it.
And because they prevented the RPO part by playing good sound defense internally on the inside. So it forced the RPO out, and Notre Dame was like, let's go, bring it outside because we got this. And they did, and they dominated it the whole way. And as far as the masking and we call it eye candy, right? So there was a lot of eye candy offensively for Notre Dame. And the other thing, and Brian pointed this out very, very well, and upon further review, is that they were going against tendencies. The way they would line up, normally it would be very obvious what they were going to do and which way they were going to run. And in this game, they pretty much ran opposite almost every single time. And so you could see Clemson just crashing one side of the line of scrimmage, and Notre Dame's wrapping around and going the other way for like 20 yards. I mean, it was a clinic on self-scouting and going against your own tendencies. It was a fantastic job by Tommy Rees. I mean, he clearly put together a game plan that Clemson was not expecting, and Dabo Swinney flat out said it in the post-game press conference. Somebody said, "Were you expecting this?" They're like, "No, we had no clue that this was coming, and they shocked us." And then, of course, he gave credit to Notre Dame and all of that, which he should have. But he fell on the sword. He's like, we did not see this coming. We had a great week of practice, and we just got our
2
butts
weeks
kicked. Yeah, 2 weeks, exactly. Can we put to bed the whole narrative that everybody talks about when schedules come out and all this other stuff about everybody having an extra week of practice to prepare for Notre Dame? Notre Dame wins all those games.
Yeah, Notre Dame wins. Notre Dame, I wish I might go back and track it, but I promise you, most teams, Notre Dame faces it 3-4 times a year. And obviously they've won, 10 plus wins in X amount of seasons. And so, yeah, their record against teams after the bye is knock on wood, nothing to be extremely worried about at this point.
And people lose their minds. Oh, they got an extra week to prepare for Notre Dame. Doesn't matter. Like, it does not matter. Clemson had an extra week, and they got the doors blown off of them. So, yeah. So anyway, I hope we can just put that narrative to bed, because I've heard it in the preseason, like the past 2 or 3 years, and it's like, guys, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So anyway, anything else with the press conference besides MVPs? Because we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I just think the best way to wrap up, the perimeter and short yardage and kind of what Freeman talked about, this team made a choice. They made a choice that they were going to rally and play as a team, play physical, make gang tackles, play with extraordinary effort. Offensively, the offensive line blowing off the ball, the physicality and the dominance that they brought. It was just a choice. And that was the mentality that they kind of built all week. Was a choice, and everyone, it was evident that everyone bought into it, and it's just a nice feeling to see, because this is the most dominating game that we've seen Notre Dame play in a long time, and it just kind of blows your socks off, because it's like, whoa, where was this just a couple of weeks ago? Why? Right? Where? But that's kind of what he talks about, building off of this and the success that it has to take you going forward. So I think it's obviously, we all hope it's a huge, building block, and that's what we hope it's going to. But yeah. It'd be nice to kind of go into the MVPs of the week, and Marcus Freeman broke it down in his press conference. So we'll just kind of quickly go on to it. Offensively, he had Drew Pine. Defensively, he had Benjamin Morrison, and then special teams were Botello and Prince Kali. So I'll start with you. Do you agree? What would yours be? And then we'll get into kind of what I'm feeling.
I think, special teams wise, I have no problem with those two guys. I mean, they were literally the guys that got Notre Dame on the board to start the game off. I mean, you got the block by Botelho, you got the catch by Kali, returns it for a touchdown. They're up 7-0, right? I don't have a problem with that. I think every week you could pick John Sott to be the MVP of the special teams. I mean, he absolutely dominated the field position game, right? I mean,
right.
Without John Sott, Clemson doesn't have that long field almost every single time they got the ball. They're starting at the 6, they're starting at the 7, they're starting at the 5. I mean, it was a clinic. It was a punting clinic. Okay, so I think he could be the MVP every time, but in this particular game, I have no problem being Botelho and Kali. Defensively, there's no way you go with anybody else except for Ben Morrison. I don't care that he's a true freshman. That has nothing to do with it. His performance was amazing for a true freshman. Yes, he played great, played out of his mind, but it was amazing for any corner. Okay,
right,
any corner whatsoever. I mean, it turns 96 touchdown. Those two things by themselves makes you the MVP. But then that doesn't even take into account how he was shedding blocks, making tackles. I mean, just sticking his nose in all game long. He was absolutely the MVP of the defense. I have no problem with that. When I heard that Drew Pine was the MVP of the offense, it definitely surprised me. Okay. I thought it would go to offensive line. I thought it might go to Audric Estime. I thought it could go to Logan Diggs. Any one of those would have been completely appropriate. Would have no problem with any of those. And then I took a step back and I thought about Drew Pine. And I thought about who Drew Pine is, right? He's an emotional leader. He kind of needs that momentum to kind of get going a little bit. And a little recognition thrown his way, I have no problem with, because he needs that. Like, it's almost like he kind of needs the pat on the back at times, or he needs to complete some passes or whatever to get himself going. He didn't turn the ball over. He had 2 huge runs in that game, right? The one for a first down, the touchdown. Those were massive runs in that game. He had the touchdown pass to Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer was pretty open. I get it, but that was still the nail in the coffin for that game. I mean, I didn't think Notre Dame was going to lose, but that was the absolute, like, this is over. Notre Dame is actually stepping on your throat for once, which is fantastic. So, I mean, for what they're asking him to do, they're asking him to manage the offense. They're asking him not to turn the ball over. And he did all of those things. I mean, got him in and out of the huddle quickly, did all of those, management type things. Drew Pine is Drew Pine, guys. Like, he's not going to have a Trevor Lawrence game. He's not going to have a Peyton Manning game. That's just not who he's going to be. Give him some praise for being Drew Pine. I mean, he was the quarterback of the team that beat the number 4 team in the country. So I have no problem with it. I really don't. Because every other those other guys we talked about will all have opportunities to be MVPs during another game. You know what I mean? The run game is still going to be really, really good. The offensive line is still going to be really, really good. I kind of talked myself into it after I was a little surprised. How about you? What say you on all 3 of those?
What say you? So we'll start defensively, because that's obviously the most obvious in my opinion. Yeah. Benjamin Morris with his perimeter tackling, the defensive balls downfield. They kept taking deep shots at him. That wasn't working. The interceptions. So, when you get 2 interceptions in a game, that's let alone going to get it for you. But like I said, when you sprinkle in the perimeter tackling, when you sprinkle in the continuous shots that came his way downfield, he shut down literally everything that came at him. He took over. Him and Bertrand kind of took over the 2 different levels of defense, I would say, and more so Morrison, obviously. So obviously, I'm good with that one. Special teams, I like Botello because he blocked it. I'm kind of with you with Collie. I think he got maybe that thrown to him for a confidence booster. We're seeing him play a lot more. The
Yeah.
success on special teams. I feel like that goes a long way with the young guy and his kind of confidence. So I like that one, but I would have gave it even more so to Stott in this game. You talked about it. I felt like him pinning down Clemson on their 6, their 7, their 13. When Notre Dame's playing dominant defense, that's another form of suffocation. You can't even get past your 20-yard line when things are going bad. It just makes it seem that much more daunting when you're in the huddle, you're looking down the field, and it's like 90 more yards to go when you're already have no production. So I'm okay with Collie, but I would have thrown Stott in there, I guess, if I could. And then offensively, I'm like you. Initially, when I saw Pine, I was like, there's no way. What are you talking about? The offensive line, Estime and Diggs had basically identical numbers, carries, all those things. And then Freeman started to talk about Drew Pine and, the things that he did really well. And some of the, most of the things that you mentioned, the execution of the offense, the breaking of the huddle, their quick plays sometimes where they were trying to get a step on Clemson or, the wrinkles, the motions, and another, some other few things that he went into. They had 1 3 and out. He liked the way that Pine extended drives,
Good
the
point.
way, it didn't matter in this game. He knew he was going to punt. So he liked the fact that Pine wasn't going 3 and out. You're still extending that clock. You're extending drives, that kind of situation. Another thing that he brought up, 0 pre-snap penalties, no false starts, no illegal formations, anything like that. And I thought those were things that we kind of, potentially overlooked. And then, the touchdowns you brought up, the one where he kept it on the RPO and the goal line after they've just run the ball, what seemed to be 8 to 10 kind of times in a row. And he punched it in. And that worked because they kept giving it. And then he finally pulled it. And that's the perfect time because they haven't shown that. They bring it out in the red zone and he gets in there for the touchdown. It's a huge touchdown to go up a score right before, 2 scores to go up before halftime. And then again, on the Mayer touchdown, pulling out the RPO after run, and then just throwing the dart right to Mayer. So I talked myself into it too. He did a lot of it. It was a very well, quarterback game. I know it's not sexy. I know there's not a lot of passing yards, but that's what he wasn't asked to do. And he executed what he was asked to do at a very efficient manner. And I think the best comparison I thought of is like, Jimmy Garoppolo, watching kind of his games last year and the 49ers, their deep run. He wasn't making big plays, but they were dominating on the offensive line. They had a good defense.
Yeah.
They ran the game and then hit kind of the small passes that came off of it. And that's what they did. So you're right. I think he does need that kind of confidence bone thrown to him with these last 3 games. You want to keep the momentum going. So I'm okay with Pine too. I thought it was a really good choice, actually.
I mean, he had a 114.4 rating. It was 9 of 17 for 85 yards, 1 touchdown. That's a 53% completion percentage, right? DJ Uiagalelei was 27 of 39. So obviously they threw the ball a boatload more because they kept going out to those bubbles. And he only had 191 yards. He did have a touchdown in garbage time. He had an interception, obviously, that was returned to the house. 69% completion percentage. And he had a lower QB rating than Drew Pine.
Yeah.
113. Now, pretty close, but still less, right? And sometimes that's all you need to be. You just need to be, and I wouldn't say that Drew Pine was efficient, but he got the job done when he needed to get the job done. Like
the big plays.
Yes, like that throw that he made to Jaden Thomas when he was rolling out.
Ooh, that was a dart on the sideline. I meant to bring that up in the post-game show. That might be one of his actual best throws this season because he was rolling out. He had pressure in his face. He was tangling the sideline, and he threw a dart to Thomas.
And there was no one else that's catching that ball. Like it was his guy or no guy, and it was a perfect throw. I mean, it was an absolute perfect throw as he's rolling out. And I know people have said this a million times, and I'm starting to agree with you because of some of the batted balls and some things like that. Get this boy outside the pocket, man. Like
sprint outs.
He's not Ian Book when it comes to running the football. He's not that athletic, granted, but he can get yards when he needs to, and he's not going to duck out of bounds like some people. He's going to do what it takes to get the yards that he needs to get. You roll him out, move the pocket, get him outside so that you're not getting as many balls batted down. And I know it's different. You can't really do RPOs that way. You kind of have to stay in the pocket to do RPOs. And he's really good at the RPO game. It's just you got to do some other things maybe to get him going from a passing standpoint. But then you also have to remember the wind in that game, and it's hard to fathom if you weren't actually there. Okay?
You guys went up there.
We went out to watch the beginning of the game, and I realized the 9th floor is different than on the playing field. I get that completely. But I almost got knocked over, to be honest with you. And I'm not a small dude as far as width is concerned, okay? I almost got knocked over. The wind gusts were so bad. And if you watch the TV copy, if you're paying attention, and you look at the referee's pants that are on the field when as the game is going on, those suckers are like flapping, right? You can't throw the ball terribly effectively in that kind of wind. And so they didn't need to, right? And so he played the game that he was asked to play, and he did a good job of it. So I have no problem with him being the player of the game on the offensive side. And the coaches know even better than we do what was being asked of him in that game.
Right.
And if they feel like he deserved it, then fantastic.
Exactly.
So I'm okay with it.
Keith brings up a good point here in the chat about the batted balls, and Freeman did kind of touch on that, and that's something that he's continuously working through, and it's something that is kind of frustrating. Seeing, and that would help with the batted balls, is getting him kind of moved around like you were talking about. And I like overall just, him being able to do, he's not going to be a guy who's a primary threat with his legs, but when you run the ball like Notre Dame and he can pull it out and make those 2 to 3 big runs a game, and especially in the red zone when it's touchdowns, hey, that's ways to get touchdowns and manufacture, and touchdowns are touchdowns. So I'll take them any way they come. If it comes from 8 passes, 50 passes, 2 passes, I'll take whatever it takes to get the touchdowns.
100%. And I will say that touchdown that he ran on the zone read, he now gave the next 3 teams on the schedule, he gave them film of Drew Pine. He might keep the ball, and you got to
respect it.
You've got to.
You know what else that helps is their power game right up the middle, because that's an extra guy that's got to take it maybe a half a step late, because he's got to respect Pine out there, and that's great. That's another layer a wrinkle that we've kind of been talking about. So I'm all for it.
You got to respect it. I mean, when that play happened in real life time, I'm watching Chris Tyree, and I'm like, what is he doing? He stopped. Why is he stopping? And then I realized that Drew Pine's running in for a touchdown. So it is, again, like you said, it's another wrinkle. It's another thing to put on film, and it's fantastic. And the next 3 teams that they play have defenses that are not great. Correct. And if you give them more to think about, even better. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. In fact, I think it's fantastic. So MVPs, I think we're on board. The final thing, we got a little bit of breaking news actually right before the show started. I know, right? Joe Wilkins.
Here is Vince D'Addario to report.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome, everyone. Joe Wilkins has decided to enter the transfer portal, and Joe will get his degree from Notre Dame. And I always find that to be one of the best parts when guys end up transferring later on in their career. They're walking away with a degree from Notre Dame, which is awesome, which he will be able to do. He's obviously going to be able to use this season to play again because he hasn't played a whole lot. He definitely played less than 4 games. So he's going to have 1 more year of eligibility remaining, and he's going to transfer and use that year of eligibility someplace else. Your thoughts when you first heard that news, Jess?
I think the biggest thought I had is, Joe Wilkins' productivity, that speaks for itself. Over his career, he has 11 receptions, 124 yards, 2 touchdowns. His most memorable was last year against, I believe, Florida State, from a ball that Cohen threw him. But, it's just, I'm happy for him as a person and kind of a player, because you need a different landscape sometimes. And obviously Notre Dame kind of wasn't what was working for him. He had the knee injury last year. This is obviously an offense now that is predicated around power run and Michael Mayer being their primary target. And so those things play into it. And so, like I said, I'm happy for him that he's potentially going to find a different avenue or opportunity that is better for him. And he has a degree from Notre Dame, which is always beneficial. Right. And that should be that's the number one emphasis. Like 1% of guys in college go and play in the NFL. And so having the college education is a very big factor. In terms of the depth chart, that's kind of the biggest thing that it impacts for Notre Dame right now, is it's already kind of a I would say, it's a weakness on the team. They don't have a lot of depth at the position. And so when you're losing bodies, that's just overall never a good thing.
Sure.
But like I said, I think is it detrimental to Notre Dame's everyday? Like, are they going to now be at a major, loss? No, but you never want to see someone leave. But again,
Especially
like
in the
I
middle
said,
of the season.
yeah, middle of the season. But happy for Joe, and I hope that he, like I said, finds a better opportunity for himself and gets kind of more playing time and maybe, the potential to kind of showcase his talent.
I echo everything you said about him as a person and getting his degree and all of that. It goes without saying. I completely agree with all of that. From a football standpoint, I almost feel like the room has been rejuvenated over the last week and a half because now you're seeing Deion Colzie and Tobias Merriweather getting a bunch of snaps that they weren't getting before.
That's a good point that I also, his snap count is also probably dwindling as these younger guys are getting acclimated.
Right. I mean, Matt Salerno, 0 snaps on Saturday night, right? And I'm sure that made a lot of people happy, right? Lorenzo Styles had 11 snaps on Saturday night. Colzie and Merriweather had the vast majority of the snaps, followed by Braden Lenzy, And so right now you're looking at Lorenzo Styles being the first man off the bench. And the way he's been playing, I think that's appropriate. And obviously you are using 12 personnel, 13 personnel. You're getting your tight ends involved. You're doing some different stuff. So they got 3 games left. I don't think the depth at wide receiver that we were all so worried about going into the season has affected them yet.
Right.
But losing one doesn't help.
Right.
And so, God forbid there's another injury or something along those lines. Obviously, you already lost Avery Davis to an injury. You're losing Joe Wilkins to the portal. That's 2 guys from a room that you really didn't have a whole lot of guys in the room in the first place. And so that obviously is scary. I'm happy that it's the tail end of the season. They've got, like I said, they've got 3 games left. They're not really throwing to the wide receivers a whole lot. And so, depth has not been a huge issue. And they're going to get some serious reinforcements from this recruiting class too. So this room's going to still be young, but they're going to get, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they went to the portal, got 1 guy. They're going to get a great freshman class coming in that's not even complete yet. And so the room is going to be just fine. Just got to get through these 3 games, 4 games, if you can count the bowl game, obviously. I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be okay because Joe Wilkins obviously hasn't really been a part of the rotation this season. So you're pulling somebody out that really wasn't in to begin with. But if there was an injury, he would have been in, So it's like, okay, we're good now. Hopefully we can get through it, that kind of a thing. So happy for him. He obviously made this decision, the best decision for him, which is awesome. I hope he finds a nice landing spot and he gets an opportunity to play and be who he thinks he can be. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jess, let's see here. The title of our show, which we haven't even really gotten to, and we should probably jump into it before we get to rapid fire, is, did Notre Dame end the Clemson Dynasty? Was that the kind of the culminate, not the culmination, but kind of an exclamation point on kind of who Clemson is right now, where they're headed in the future? What does this say about the Clemson Tigers and where they're at?
The immediate reaction is obviously you want to look at it and you want to be like, yes, Notre Dame is into Clemson, right? And that's kind of like it brings more emphasis to how big of a win it is. And so I looked at it as kind of what Clemson has at the remaining of the season, and then kind of going forward to what they need to kind of address if they don't want that to happen, and kind of the immediate needs that they have. This is Clemson's first loss, and they have Louisville, Miami, and South Carolina to end their schedule. So that's not going to be overly challenging for them. We'll see them in the ACC championship, probably against North Carolina, who has Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina State left. Those are probably going to be your ACC matchup. And so you win that game, and they're probably going to end up in a New Year's 6 bowl game at that point, potentially even a playoff spot. You never know. The one loss, you don't know who could potentially
one loss conference champion, right? I mean,
right. You have one bad blemish. I mean, Notre Dame's made that argument before, and they don't even have a conference championship either. So, Clemson's going to be in the thick of it as long as they take care of their business at the end of the season. And so I think I need to see them respond now. Like, you can't have any mistakes, going forward in these last 3 games. You have to stay on schedule for what you're trying to, accomplish for the rest of the year. And then bigger picture, I looked at, DJ is not the answer at quarterback for them. And, Trevor Lawrence was really good. That was seen by, him being drafted and all the records he set and Heisman and all that kind of stuff. So obviously anything that comes after that is not going to be as good. And then the question then becomes, is Klubnik the answer? And poor guy got thrown out there this past week and gets blitzed and throws the interception, and he gets the yank like it's his fault or something like that. It's just, I know. It felt bad. That was just Dabo's brain scrambling on the sideline because he had no idea what was going on himself. So I think there's just a lot of things that have to kind of unwind for me to make a definitive answer about, the end of Clemson's dynasty. But for right now, it's definitely on a regression. They've hit their peak. Their peak was Trevor Lawrence, Tyler Boyd, ETN, the very good defensive players that they had. I can't name them all by name, but I know they've had very good defensive players, defensive linemen, linebackers that are now playing in the NFL. And they hit their peak, and it's so hard to have that continued success like we've seen from Bama for so long, or, Clemson did it for so long in the from 2012, 2016, 2017, 2018 area. And so to come down off of that now, I definitely think we are on the backside or the back slope of Clemson's, run here. And if they don't get some of the things that I mentioned kind of addressed, they're going to have bigger issues going forward and kind of continuing that great amount of success that we saw in the Trevor Lawrence era.
They don't have the game-changing quarterback. I think Cade Klubnik can be good. I think he can be a very good quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is a generational quarterback, but the problem is they had 2 generational quarterbacks in a row in Watson
right.
and
Trevor
Lawrence. And so it worries me that I shouldn't say it worries me. That was a very, how do I want to put this? Beneficial situation for Clemson because they had a stud quarterback 2 in a row that elevated their offenses and allowed them to do things that normal teams aren't going to be able to do. And they elevated the people around them. It elevated the offensive line because Clemson has never had an amazing offensive line. And now, all of a sudden now, it's coming to roost because they don't have a great quarterback behind that offensive line and it's becoming obvious that the offensive line isn't fantastic, right? And so they're coming back to the pack. I mean, Clemson is coming back to the pack. They're still not recruiting the offensive line fantastic. The wide receivers, we talked about this going into the game. The wide receivers themselves had, they were a decent group. They've got some youth. They've got some talent in that youth, but they don't have that alpha wide receiver. When in the past, they had a couple of alphas at the same time. And when you have a couple of alphas at the same time, then you can do a lot of things offensively because you add those couple of alpha wide receivers along with a generational quarterback, and all of a sudden your offense is amazing. And then you add Travis Etienne in there as well, and you've got an offense that's going to outscore anybody. And they just don't have that right now. They got a pretty darn good defense, but you can't put everything on the defense if the offense can't score points. And it's just trending in that direction. And so without the skill players that they've had in the past, now you're talking about the offensive line that is starting to show that they're not the best. And so it's kind of a steady decline. And the bottom line is Clemson can't score points right now. And if you can't score points, you're not going to win the big games. You're still going to be able to be an upper echelon ACC team, an upper echelon team in any conference, but they're not going to be amongst the elite because they can't score a bunch of points. Right. And so I think they're coming back to the pack, and Notre Dame kind of showed that in a very demonstrative way Saturday night. But the bottom line is they're probably still going to win out and have an opportunity at the college football playoff. I worry about them playing an elite team in the Final Four, though. I think that could be rough.
If that's what Notre Dame did and it's on tape
Right.
like that, I think the biggest issue with DJ and the Clemson's offense right now is DJ doesn't pose any threat downfield, and they don't have any wide receivers to extend the field. Trevor Lawrence had that cannon of an arm. If you shut down their run game and the RPO game like Notre Dame did, they can't really do anything. Notre Dame was baiting DJ. Please throw the ball downfield. Please take a chance. But Dabo doesn't obviously trust him. He doesn't trust him with the turnovers, throwing interceptions. That's what got pulled him out in the Syracuse game, and why Klubnik came in is Dabo just simply said, we can't have you turn the ball over. And that seemed like to me what his restriction was of letting DJ loose against Notre Dame is he just kept running into those small screen plays and the run game shutting down. And it's like, okay, Dabo, well, why just cut him loose? Like you can't keep doing it over and over. But that just shows his weakness and kind of where Clemson is at offensively right now. And sure, they'll probably have a big game against, whoever and put up some stats and DJ will look better. But when you're going against elite defenses and good teams like we're talking about, Notre Dame has a good defense. I'm not saying they're like the greatest defense, but obviously, they played a very good defensive game and showed what it takes to beat Clemson. And so I think if you run into stuff like that, they're going to have issues. And so I just don't think that they are where they used to be. And they're steadily kind of declining and heading back to the pack. But it looks like we've created some conversation already about, if this happens, who could be in the playoffs? And it's always fun. That's kind of like the best part, in my opinion, because you never know what's going to happen.
Absolutely. And when there's going to be chaos, there's always chaos at the top, and it affects everything, right? And that's why we do the show on Tuesday nights as well at 7 tomorrow, by the way, 7:30. We're going to have the college football playoff reveal show because I believe ESPN is going to have their show at 7. So we are going to come on at 7:30. And we are going to start talking about the top 25. So that should be a lot of fun. And of course, you better tune in to IB Nation Sports Talk with Sean and Jesse tomorrow at 6. And it will lead right in to our show at 7:30 with Brian and myself. And who knows? Maybe there'll be a special guest. Maybe Jesse will come by. Maybe Sean will come by. Maybe Ryan will come by. You never know. You never know. I know. Here's what I can tell you for a fact. I know Jesse's going to show up on one of these college football playoff type shows because he's an analytics guy. And these shows that we do on Tuesday nights, it's all about numbers. Who played who? What is your strength of schedule? What's your strength of record? What's your, game control number? What all of this stuff. I could just see the numbers computing in your head, man.
It's fun.
Just saying.
I have stuff queued up. I have a lot of Big Ten friends, right? I unfortunately, I've lived in Ohio. I've lived in Michigan. I've developed, some friends with of those schools. And we've gotten into some arguments. And I made a note in my phone and put down Michigan's schedule. Their combined schedule after 9 weeks is 38-45. I mean, come on. Ohio State's 40-41. Notre Dame's 51-29. Like, that's a huge difference. And, it's like, come on, like, you can't talk to me when your best win is like Maryland's, I get it, but so like that plays into my mind. I'm always thinking about those kind of things, strength of schedule, all the different, like you were talking about control rate earlier, dominance, those things are all factored in, but definitely tune in tomorrow this is round 2, part 2, right? Of your guys's, because it's only the second one. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see where Notre Dame ends up and all that fun stuff. So, all right. It's time. It is that time, Jesse. Are you ready for rapid fire, my friend?
Let's do the rapid fire and get on out, baby.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. All right. Let's see here. Let me pull it up. I said, are you ready? And I don't even have it pulled up. So that's going to be obviously a bit of a problem. All right, here we go.
Right before you go, I thought there's one Savage Fitness says, since Notre Dame beat Clemson in North Carolina and they're playing for the ACC championship, does that make Notre Dame ACC champs? I mean, kind of de facto. You throw in 27 straight against ACC opponents.
Right.
I mean, we run the ACC, but rapid fire. Sorry, got distracted.
No. You're 100% right. There is no doubt about that. Notre Dame is the ACC champion. I'm sorry. So you just send the trophy to South Bend. That's where it belongs. All right. Last week, Jess, we talked about beating Clemson wouldn't erase the losses to Marshall or Stanford. How do you feel about that today after the game against Clemson on Saturday night?
So for me, Clemson erases one of them. It doesn't erase both of them. And I say that because going into the season, I thought Notre Dame's honest record would be 10-2, right? I thought that they would handle most of the games and potentially lose to the combination of, Clemson, USC, or maybe a random one in there that kind of falls through the cracks. And so I was okay with, not okay, but with the potential of 2 losses was kind of, the mindset that I was going into the season. And then when you lose to a team like Marshall and Stanford, 2 teams that are just kind of inexcusable losses, then you turn around and beat the team that, largely, I would say 90% of the country said would beat Clemson at the beginning of this, or a team that in Clemson that most people said that would beat Notre Dame. I'm okay with swapping one of those out. Those ones kind of, cancel out for me. But there's still the one kind of ugly loss that remains. And USC doesn't really do anything for me either, because at the beginning of the season, I thought that USC was a toss-up, and I thought Notre Dame I thought it'd be a very close game, and I thought Notre Dame had a very good chance to win that game kind of regardless. So for me, Clemson, the big win against Clemson, yeah, it does kind of take the sting away and erases one of those bad losses. I wouldn't say both of them, but it takes away one of them, but also brings back the frustration of Stanford, really? But you could do this to number 4 Clemson, the number 10 defensive line in the country, averaging 85 yards a game, multiple defensive, linemen who are projected to go to the NFL, and then, that performance against Stanford. So, yes, it gets rid of one of them, but it doesn't erase all of it.
The word erase, I think, is what I have the hardest time with, because
divert.
Yeah, I mean, it takes some of the sour taste out of your mouth, right? It makes it more palatable, I guess, because now we're riding high on the win that they had on Saturday night. We're riding high on the fact that they're on a win streak. We're riding high on the fact that they should win the next 3 games and finish the season 9-3. I had a great debate with one of my buddies last night, and we were talking about how most people thought that Notre Dame was going to be 9-3 this year. And there's a good chance that Notre Dame's going to be 9-3 this year.
Just not to who you thought they would be.
I said, but not all 9-3s are created equal, man. Like, you can't.
There's layers to it.
If you lose to Ohio State, Clemson, and USC, for example, and you're 9-3, is that a successful season? First year head coach, all that stuff. But if you lose to Ohio State, Marshall, and Stanford, but you beat all these ranked teams, it's like, what did we just witness? Like, that is not success. That's just
the most roundabout 9-3 way.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, 9-3 is palatable. 9-3 is something that you can build on. I would much rather have it to be where they lost their games early and they finish off winning, which I'm cool with, because that can launch you into the offseason. It's going to help in recruiting. It's going to do all of those things that, remember the feelings we all had in the offseason with recruiting and going into the spring and coming out of the spring. We were all just riding high. You can still do that coming off of a 9-3 season. And someday, I'm hoping, when we're celebrating a national championship, we can look back at Marcus Freeman's first year and be like, yeah, remember that 9-3 year when they lost to Stanford and Marshall? Those were just, build-up moments, that just made us stronger and da-da-da-da-da, and we won a national championship and, that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping that that's what we're able to look back on, but I just can't erase those 2 losses. Like, erase is too strong of a word for me. But I'm very happy that they beat Clemson. That was one of the best nights that we've had in a long time. And Marcus Freeman said it's like, moments like this are few and far between, so you have to enjoy it. I'm still enjoying it. There's no doubt about that. So doesn't erase, but it definitely makes it more palatable. That's for sure.
Yeah, I started thinking about, I went to a lot of games between, let's see here, like 2000 and probably like 4 to like 2014. And even after that, I still would come back to a lot of games. And I can't remember, I was so jealous and envious because this is one of the most, biggest wins in a 15-year span. And I went to a lot of those games and a lot of, I watched the Bush push happen. I watched, the ups and downs. And of course there was big wins sprinkled in there, but nothing to this magnitude. So it was just really, really awesome to see overall.
No doubt. All right. Buy or sell Saturday's game as the best for linebacker J.D. Bertrand in his career.
Oh, that is 100% buy for Mr. Bertrand, and I think it's what makes it that is because the stage itself, right? Like that, it's like if a regular season, baseball player has kind of just an average season, but he goes on to win like the World Series MVP. He stepped up when it mattered the most, and I feel like that was what Bertrand did in this game. Is he stepped up when his team needed him the most as captain, as a leader.
Yeah.
Made big plays, the huge tackle for loss that set, Clemson up for a 3rd and long in a certain situation. I know he had, I think, around like 9 tackles, couple tackles for loss. Just overall, a very sound defensive game, and when it mattered the most. So I'm 100% buy on this.
Yeah, I mean, he had 12 total tackles, 9 solos. I mean, a sack, 2 tackles for loss. I mean, it was by far from an aesthetic standpoint, from an execution standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. I think you make a great point there, Jess, about how as the team captain, he stepped up in the biggest game of the season.
Yeah, they challenged him to be physical and rally around the ball, and that's what he did all game. And you as a leader, you set an example, and if you want everyone else to do it, and everyone's looking up to you, that's a huge, huge emphasis.
No doubt about it. And he stepped up when they needed him the most. And I don't think he was ever as bad as some of the fans thought that he was. Right?
Yeah,
but he was struggling. There were times where he was struggling.
Well, think of the amount of defenses that he's gone through in X amount of years, schemes, being bounced around. It's hard to get your footing. And I think this is kind of his footing game. We finally seen him kind of fit in the footing of who he is as a linebacker.
Yep, I completely agree with you. So he wasn't ever as bad, but he played a tremendous game on Saturday night. By far his best game in a Notre Dame uniform, and I'm super stoked for him, to be honest with you. So I'm proud of him. I'm happy for him. That was great. All right, fill in the blank. It's blank that the Detroit Lions have announced Barry Sanders will get a statue next season.
It is amazing that Barry Sanders is going to get his statue out there. Obviously, he's, an all-time Lions legend, very iconic. I have a lot of Lions friends, like, again, because Michigan, I lived up in Michigan. I have Lions. I know about the inner workings of these Lions. It's always fun because I get to poke at, the Michigan being just not great enough and the Lions always kind of sucking. And most of the time it's a win for me. But I just think it's great overall for the fan base because, and I'm not trying to, be, overly rude here, but it's just the facts. They don't have a lot of success as a franchise. They don't have a lot of playoff success as a franchise. And, I think that it's something that gives, like I said, the fan base something to be excited about. There obviously will be an unveiling, that kind of stuff. So overall, I think it's a great thing for the Lions. I just hope that they do something and have some success here soon. I always think that they're right on that verge of, okay, this is when the Lions kind of break the tipping point and, flip to going back to the being above average, but it just hasn't been there yet.
For me, the fill in the blank is it's been way too long. I don't understand why it took so long for them. I mean, what have they had to celebrate where they couldn't? I mean, usually when they do something like this, it's like, okay, we need to get something going here. We need to pump up the fan base. We need to, bring some people back in, whatever. They haven't been any good since he retired. They weren't even all that great when he played. And so what were they waiting for? Do you know the year that he retired, Jesse?
No, do you?
I looked it up. He graduated. He retired the year I graduated high school. 1999. Wow. Okay. Over 20 years ago. And you're just now getting around to building this man a statue. I'm not well versed in Lions lore. Okay. But he was arguably the best Lion of all time. And it took you over 20 years to build that man a statue. Come on now.
It reminds me of a very, very similar Cowboy situation that Jerry Jones hasn't quite retired Jimmy Johnson yet into the Ring of Honor. And it's just like, what are you doing?
Seriously.
What is going on here?
Seriously, you're not wrong there.
And that's how I feel about Barry Sanders as well. And his statue taking, like you said, over 20 years.
I mean, he was unbelievable to watch. I mean, that was right in my high school career, and I would watch him all the time. And because, you either got Bears, Lions, or Colts games around here. So I watched a lot of Lions football when I was in high school, and watching that man do his thing it's unbelievable. And if anybody out there doesn't know about Barry Sanders, and I can't imagine you'd be in this chat if you didn't, but if you don't, just YouTube the man and just watch that dude run.
Yeah, I mean, he
smokes.
stayed. The biggest thing, he stayed with a Detroit man through and through. Played 10 seasons with only Detroit and 10 seasons as a running back. That's like unheard of. The longevity, the dominance, and then staying with one team, the loyalty. It's like, yeah, I'm more and more talking myself into this, like with Drew Pine. Like, what have they been doing for so long? Is it a money issue? Like, what?
Right.
Are you guys so bad you haven't had any fans to come to the stadium and you got no funds to, build the goat of your franchise a statue?
Oh, they could have come up with a collection and gotten him a statue 15 years ago.
Man, the fans would have started a GoFundMe if they knew that was the case.
Because, I mean, what is it, 5 years after you retire that you can go into the Hall of Fame?
I think it's something close to that.
Isn't it? Okay, let's see here. Barry Sanders Hall of Fame. Let's see here. Of course, it doesn't come up right there. I don't know when he went into the Hall of Fame, but 2003. So yeah, 4 years, maybe even. Okay, that's ridiculous. So he goes into the Hall of Fame, and 20 years later, you build him a statue at his own facility.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't get it. All right, let's move on to something that's not going to annoy me as much. Well, no, it will because of the first two words I'm about to say. Tom Brady became the first quarterback in NFL history to eclipse 100,000 passing yards in the regular season and postseason combined. He also notched his 43rd career fourth quarter comeback, tying Peyton Manning for the most by an NFL starting quarterback. Which record is a bigger deal?
This is a tough one because obviously fourth quarter comebacks to me it's like a balancing scale. One, you're put in the position to have to come back, right? And so it's a combination of whatever other factors led to that point. But that's kind of like your clutch stat or your clutch rating, right? Like,
yeah, right.
You get the ball back and you drive down the field and you win the game. And that's probably what separates people like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and the rest of the other quarterbacks is they're often in the situation. They just fail to do so. And so that's kind of like your clutch rating overall is how I kind of, analyze that one. And then the passing yards, yeah, it's up there because, no one's ever done it, but the man has played for like 25 years. Like it's going to come eventually. Right. And
he's played in the NFL. He's been in the NFL longer than years he was alive, not playing in the NFL.
Right. So like those things are naturally going to compile. It's just kind of over time, getting more games. And so I actually think that the comebacks is more important because like I said, like that's what's defining you. That's your clutch rate. That's your win. You're single-handedly kind of winning the game at that point as you're orchestrating the offense down the field. So I'm going to take that is the bigger deal in terms of Tom Brady's success.
I agree with you. And to be honest with you, what jumped off the page to me as far as this question was concerned was the fact that he tied Peyton Manning, who's been retired for a while.
That shows how Peyton was just comeback after comeback.
And, part of that is because maybe the Colts weren't as good and he's having to come back more often. And the Patriots were better and probably weren't trailing at the end of games. Okay, I get all of that for sure. But the fact that you're just now breaking, potentially, he hasn't done it yet, tying one of Peyton Manning's records is just kind of mind-boggling to me. That tells me how good Peyton Manning was. I mean, Peyton Manning, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. Maybe it's going to tick people off. He's a better quarterback from a physicality standpoint. He's just a better quarterback. Tom Brady did it better in the system and with the players around him and his nutrition and all of that stuff, right? But Peyton Manning, man, 43 comeback wins, and he's been retired for a really long time. It took this long for Tom Brady to tie him. I think that's probably the most impressive. I will go with the clutch rating as well, and I will say that the comeback wins is a more impressive record. But at this point, man, Tom Brady is just racking up like stats from a longevity standpoint.
Right.
And
when you're given so many opportunities, you're just gonna get there eventually.
Right. I mean, 100,000 passing yards is ridiculous.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, there's no reason to downplay that.
No, that's ridiculous. And yes, it's an accumulation stat, obviously, but he's still the only one to ever do it. And I would venture to guess he's probably the only one that's going to do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty much impressible. Impressible? That's not a word. Impressive. Okay, let's see here. Do I have any more written down? No. So here's the one that I had written down over here. Okay. Frank Wright from the Colts was let go today. And Jeff Saturday is now the interim head coach for the Colts. On a scale of 1 to 10, what are your thoughts on the former center for Peyton Manning as now the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts?
So 10 being like out of the park, yes, and 1 being like, what the hell are you doing? I'm at a solid like 4 here because I really don't understand this move. I know Jeff Saturday has been okay. First of all, let me backtrack a little bit. I think it was time for Frank to be let go. First of all, that's big. Number one, yes, I agree.
Way too many games they shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going on with Jonathan Taylor. I don't know what's going on with the offensive line. I know that they haven't had a steady quarterback, but again, the defense underperforming this year after being so much better last year. Jeff Saturday, though, like I saw a tweet today. He coached high school football 2 years ago. And granted, it's high school football. You can't really control what comes your way. But he was like 3-7 as a head coach in high school football. And I think that was his most recent head coaching experience. And now he's been a consultant for the Colts. So, I don't know. Consultant's such a broad term. Like, what is his day-to-day task? Like, what is he exactly consulting on? Right. But he's had his hand in the cookie jar. And so that was enough for them to say, okay, Jeff Saturday obviously played through the era with Peyton Manning, was an offensive lineman, but he's the in-house guy, the lovable guy. And I think it makes sense on those terms, but I don't know. I get it. It's an interim head coach. So in the long run, does it really matter? Right. Because I think we're past week 9 now. So we're basically at the halfway point of the NFL season. And, the Colts aren't really potentially going to be competing for that division too much. So I don't know. I'm still stuck on a 4 because the overall head coaching experience, like, is this just giving him like, hey, okay, we know that this not really much writing. Here's your shot. Like, if you run with it, you run with it. He fits the role. He fits being the Colts Indianapolis man. I don't know, but it was a very interesting decision in the end. And I'm very excited now to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I don't know. He wasn't an actual coach on the staff, correct? He was
he's
like
just a consultant,
front office kind of consultant guy, and all of a sudden now you're the head coach. Like, you want to thrust. You want to talk about a rise to fame. I'm looking at his timeline here. He resigned as the head coach of a high school in 2020, Valentine's Day of 2020. And now November 7th, 2022, you're the head coach of an NFL football team.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd like to be that guy. I don't know about you, Vince.
Holy moly. And again, I get it from a PR standpoint, and the Colts are usually pretty good at PR and doing that whole thing. I get all that. I put it at like a 2 or a 3, if I'm being honest. I think he is a bright guy. I enjoyed listening to him when he worked for ESPN and he would break some stuff down and, things like that. And to be an offensive lineman, you got to be smart anyway. Right. And so I appreciate offensive linemen for that matter. But dang, man, that's the move. I'm just surprised because it's still November. You play into January. Maybe he brings them back and all of a sudden, they're in the playoffs or something. That would be amazing, and that would be fantastic. I'm sure all the Colts fans around here would be excited, but holy moly, that's the move? Come on, man.
Chi-Town got it right. It just felt lazy.
Yes, I agree completely. All right, Jess, we got a couple of super chats. Let's get to these before we head on out of here. First from Tyler Evans. Thank you for the super chat, Tyler. He says, what point in the game do you guys feel that Notre Dame locked up the win against Clemson? Go.
Oh man. I really liked the the touchdown right before half, and then Clemson retaliating, Notre Dame just being like, "That's the best you got right now. We have bigger things to worry about than responding to this pettiness that you have going on right now." I'd say either that point or, when they score the third touchdown and Clemson's going down the field via, penalties, these obscure penalties. And Notre Dame says, instead of, penalties suck, especially on the defensive side when you're executing.
Yeah.
It gets you kind of in a mental state and you're doing things right. And then to turn around and say, you know what, we're going to put our foot down and just take the ball away ourselves. Morrison, obviously, from there takes it back for a touchdown. So I felt in that kind of transition to right before halftime to the interception by Morrison, you could kind of pick any time in that range, but that's where I felt that it was locked up.
The fan in me felt pretty stinking confident after the block punt for a touchdown. And I know that's super early in the game, but it's
a tone setter.
Yes, that's exactly right. It felt very similar to Syracuse when Brandon Joseph took back the touchdown put back the interception for a touchdown in the first play of the game. Felt very similar to that. For the Syracuse game, from that point on, I was like, this is great. Like, I was totally chill, relaxed. I was totally chill and relaxed after that first touchdown. I felt really good about it moving forward. The analyst in me would probably push it back to Benjamin Morrison's first interception. And then when they punched that in to go up 21-0. When they went up 21-0, it was like, Syracuse doesn't have the chops to score 21 points. Like, I just don't see them scoring 21. And so when they scored that touchdown, it was a short field. They went in there, punched it in. Like, it's game over, And then, of course, that just got cemented even more on the 96-yard interception return. But that was just icing on the cake, man. Like, no doubt about that. All right. Chief Brody, thank you for the super chat. Best believe that if the committee gets a chance to put a 3-loss LSU and a 3-loss Notre Dame in a New Year's Six bowl game, they're going to take it. I mean, if you're looking for eyeballs on the TV screen and you're looking for butts in the seats, that matchup would, of course, be ideal. I just don't see 2 3-loss teams in a New Year's Six game situation.
Hard to swing. As alluring as it would be with Notre Dame, LSU, Freeman, Kelly, all of it that goes along with it and how much it would sell. I don't think they can get away with 2 3-loss teams.
Yeah.
Like you were saying.
Yeah. It's going to be really, really tough. I mean, maybe. I mean, it's possible, but look, I'm here for it. Like, I would love for that to be the matchup.
I'd love the better bowl game. Sign me up.
Absolutely. And, Notre Dame has played LSU in bowl games. This would be the 3rd time in like 6
Good
years.
Success rate.
Or something like that. And they're undefeated. So, I mean, I'll take it, and then just the icing on the cake of who you would beat. That'd be awesome.
Whoa.
Just saying. All right. Relic Q, thanks for the super chat. I may be out of the loop, but with the recent success and the team playing well, is there any chance that we can still get/flip a quarterback in this year's class? Well, if they get a quarterback in this year's class, it's going to be a flip. There's nobody that is uncommitted that I think is a take for Notre Dame right now in the 23 class. So if they get one, it'll be a flip. I know that obviously this is more of a question for Ryan when he's on, but at the same time, I do know that they are recruiting quarterbacks. No doubt about it. They're not giving up on that position. They want a quarterback in this class, and they're not just going to take a body, right? They want an actual quarterback in this class, somebody that they feel they can win with. So can they? Yes. Will they? I don't know. It's possible. We'll see.
Yeah, like you said, you don't just hand pluck quarterbacks for the sake of it. These are guys that are, especially the quarterback position, you're giving scholarship to, right? A big chunk. You're not going to take away from other players in your overall scholarships just to give, a quarterback a scholarship for a scholarship. And the same comes true with the portal. You find guys who are going to fit your offense and what you're trying to run. And so that also factors into it. But that's more of what you were talking about of Ryan's aspects of things, but just kind of my general thought on it.
Yep. No doubt about it. All right. Next from Connor Patton, our buddy. Thanks for the super chat, my man. He says, you guys are awesome. Thanks for the great coverage.
Well, those are the easiest ones.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You're the best.
That's right. Joe Poppity. Hey, guys. Awesome job tonight. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it. I hope you're recovering from the Phillies' loss in the World Series. But, hey, man.
I was rooting for him.
You were in the World Series, and I was rooting for him, too. My guy Kyle Schwarber was there. Obviously, I would have, and Oh gosh, why is his name escaping me? The other outfielder who used to play for the Cubs. Thank you very much. I was rooting for him, man. I wanted the Phillies to win that one, and they just couldn't get it done, but it is what it is. Joe says, still in the afterglow of the dominating win, if you could pick one play Saturday night when you think Clemson knew that they were in trouble, what would it be? So there you go. I think we already explained that one, Joe, but I appreciate the super chat very, 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 very much. There were a lot of plays that were very exciting.
For Joe's, I mean, to nail it down specifically, Clemson was 0-5 on third down going in the half. Notre Dame runs 10 straight times and pounds it in with 30 seconds left. That's when I think they knew that, oh boy, what have we gotten ourselves into?
I know, right?
To have just no offensive success and then to just get bullied 10 straight runs down the field. That had to be. Dabo was like, well, I don't know. Anyone else got any ideas?
All right, we got one more super chat here from Relly Q. He says, should every starting AP ranking be the final rankings from the previous year? Your number 1, 2, 3, etc., and can defend your rank until proven otherwise. It's interesting. The problem is it's college, and if you lose certain guys, if you you lose some key guys to that ranking, I think it has to be taken into account. But at the same time, if you're losing guys, then the guys that you're replacing them with, you don't really know what they can do. And so maybe they're just as good, if not better, than the guys that they replaced. You never know, right? I wouldn't have a problem with that. And I think that there is a little bit of that actually does take place. You see a lot of teams getting a lot of respect for what they did previous years in the first preseason ranking. But that's why I like the college football rankings that don't come out until November. Yeah. Because you actually get an opportunity to see if these teams are any freaking good and you can rank them appropriately.
I'd almost be in favor of no rankings until we get to this point. Because it eliminates all preconceived notions, biases. Yep. We just let it all play out and then let the ranking. Everyone's just a pool. You're just gathering your ranking. You're working for your ranking. You're fighting for your ranking.
Absolutely.
And then you come out with like maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks in. You could push it back just a little bit. And then I'm almost be in favor of that idea, actually, now that I think about it.
I think it'd be fantastic because then you're actually seeing, because like I said, in college, there's so much turnover from year to year most of the time. And if you're a top team in the country, you're probably going to lose some guys to the NFL. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. And so you're going to have a lot of turnover. I like not having any rankings until November. So, we got another one from Joe.
Joe's on a roll.
Thanks, Joe, man. Really appreciate it. He says, A, so glad you pronounced my name right. And B, I wouldn't have taken Wheeler out. C, I found it humorous that Dabo didn't know how to act at the end of the game. It was like Brian said in the postgame show. I think he said it in the postgame show. It was like that scene in Miracle where the U.S. coach leans over and he looks at the Russian coach and he's like freaking out and he's like playing with his eyebrows. He's like, he doesn't know what to do because he's never been in that position before. Clemson's never been in that position. They've never been absolutely butt whooped like that, where all 3 phases of the game scored touchdowns against you. He didn't know what to do. It was great. It was great.
Yeah, and Joe, I agree with you. There's no reason to take Wheeler out of the game with your season on the line. Right. And then obviously the next guy comes in and gives up 3 runs. It's just very demoralizing when Wheeler's been your ace the entire season. But I think in the end, and I'm not trying to, throw any more, rain on you, but this just the Astros pitching took over towards the back end. And that proved to be the difference maker. The Phillies played great, and I just think they ran out of that one last kind of spark, and that's where the Astros pitching kind of took over.
Absolutely. But thanks, Joe. Really appreciate not only you being in the chat, listening. I do enjoy your rants on Facebook. I do enjoy it, man. I always knew what was going on in the World Series just by watching what Joe was saying on Facebook. So
there you go.
That was it was hilarious. So anyway. All right, Jess, that's going to do it for this edition of IB Nation Sports Talk. Make sure that you join the podcast tomorrow at 1:00 because Brian and I are going to be up and we are going to be, I've got the day off. It's election day. Make sure you guys get out and vote. I voted in every election since I've been 18. So make sure you get out and vote. It is your civic duty. This is coming from a former social studies teacher. I would say the same thing to all my students. I've been taking my kids to the voting booth ever since they were old enough to walk. So take your kids, go vote, do your civic duty. That way, well, you still will, but don't complain about what happens if you didn't vote. I will put it that way.
Yeah.
So make sure you tune in tomorrow at 1:00. So we'll have a podcast then. Jesse and Sean will be back at 6:00. And then Brian and I will be back again at 7:30 to break down the college football playoff rankings. So make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that notification bell. And we will all talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk Radio, as well as the Irish Breakdown podcast. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, everyone.